and decide we're going to practice. They require structure, as you were saying. We need to help kids learn how to form teams, organize committees, plan and carry out and analyze and think about mistakes and how they correct them. And it doesn't have to start big. I think one of the problems that I notice moving around the Arab world is how much we love to criticize things at the national level and talk about politics. But the same people that spend quite a bit of time doing that are ignoring problems right in their neighborhood or in their backyard where they could begin to come together and form those building blocks of experience and skills.
Well, it looks like we have the right ingredients for a thriving philanthropic movement. We have the youth, we are providing the structures, but I think in addition to that, what can governments do to provide more incentives for organizations to become involved? For example, many companies give because of tax breaks. In the GCC, where income tax is very low or almost non-existent, what incentives could there be to create the right environment for organizations to be motivated to give? And
I think governments can show encouragement in public displays of support for these organizations. An example in Saudi Arabia is the participation, for example, of the king and the crown prince in certain ceremonies that the King Faisal Foundation undertakes, whether it is the King Faisal Prize that is given on an annual basis in various fields, that includes prizes in sciences and medicine, which bring recipients from all over the world, along with Islamic disciplines and Arabic literature, and the King Faisal International Prize for Service to Islam. The king or the crown prince attends these ceremonies and gives credence and importance to these ceremonies that highlight the activities of the foundation and bring attention to its activities, and that definitely has a ring effect on the rest of society, because the leadership is seen as recognizing that kind of work. And there are other ways of doing that, maybe not tax incentives, but perhaps even participating with the foundation in certain projects that bring good and so on to a community. All of these things can invigorate and support the activity.
Omar, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, one of the key things that we find, even though my board is essentially half of the cabinet, we discovered that we need an NGO law that actually allows for all of these organizations that we want to support to actually exist legally. And so currently what we're doing is trying to adopt these organizations so that they have some kind of legal framework. But going down the road, you really need to think about having an impersonal system for developing civil society, as I think we're talking about.
I think perhaps, Your Majesty, there's one other thing that government can do, or frankly any very large foundation with a very large endowment, and that is to encourage collaboration around key projects. One of the things that I find interesting about the philanthropic world is there's a lot of competition, actually. There's competition for funding, there's competition for programs, whose program is more inspiring than the other. Of course, a little competition is a good thing because it inspires people to performance. But on the other hand, it also is true that sometimes better results are achieved when people collaborate and leverage off of each other's activities. I think that is, in large measure, one of the secrets of the success of the Jordan Education Initiative. And so I think government and big foundations can encourage collaboration can encourage people to leverage each other's work.
Well, in many cases in the Arab world, you find that there's competition between the NGOs and the government.
Yes, of course.
And that's an issue to look into. And actually, no matter how large the NGO sector is, we find that they are dwarfed by the spending, that the welfare spending by the government. Is it realistic for us to expect governments to give funding to NGOs to carry out projects instead of them executing projects themselves? For example, Fadi, you were talking about with the Ministry of Education, you're offering to fix a school, a public school. So you would think that the government would be welcoming of such an initiative. So is it realistic for us to expect government to be more hands-off and really sort of empower NGOs such as yours to move forward?
I think absolutely. I think in Jordan there is that tradition of incredible cooperation and work between the NGO sector and government. In fact, the Ministry of Planning now does a lot of its developmental work in poverty pockets in Jordan through NGOs, and that's what empowers these NGOs and makes them and gives them the experience in actually going out and doing it and building their capabilities and capacity building. So government in Jordan is developed enough and I think is aware enough and mature enough to get out of that process and allowing NGOs to do it. What was different with us is that we're a strange creature for them because we're private sector, and the private sector is continuously questioned with its motives. No matter what you do, there must be something that you're hiding behind your intentions of why you want to give. So we're not an NGO, we're just a bunch of 6 or 7 private sector people that want to do good. And that is just simply not a bit alien. Do good meaning in an activist way, not only in a charitable way where we're giving money to NGOs and sitting back and
it's more involved
and again feeling good about it. No. We decided that we want not only to give our money, but to give our skills. A lot of the things that we do in that community is bringing our skills, allowing them to bringing jobs to the people that actually, the volunteers and the people that get scholarships. We do job placements for them. We teach them how to do interviews. We teach them how to do their CVs. We give them internships. It's
more about capacity building.
Capacity building and empowerment. At the end of the day, again, development should not be left to government and government alone because government does not always know best.
In fact, sometimes it's better to give to organizations that specialize in certain things, and that's personally been my experience. So if you have an organization that's been involved in working with orphans, for example, they'll probably do a better job at running an orphanage than the Ministry of Social Development, if you will. And as you know, in the Arab world, there are a lot of complaints and criticisms directed towards government and towards leaderships, etc. And there's always a quest for democratization. I feel that building a strong civil society paves the way for that. If you have an empowered civil society, then that lessens the role of government and increases decision-making to the people, and therefore moves us towards more democratic practices.
Your Majesty, I must tell a story that occurred the first time I came to Jordan for the very first regional World Economic Forum that was held here. It was before this beautiful conference center was built. We were in the tent.
And the air conditioning
was a little hotter. But I recall being on a panel, and the panel was discussing, among other things, the politics of the region, and this was in 2003, so there was much to discuss. And at the end of the panel, we all walked off, and I had noticed during the panel that there was a security guard standing, listening very intently. And when we went back into the green room, I said to him, I introduced myself and said, you know, I noticed you were listening, and he told me a little bit about himself. He was Egyptian, and he had come here. And I said, well, what did you think about this discussion? And he said something very wise, I think. He said, you know, we talk a lot about politics, and politics is very important. But in the end, it's all about economics. Mm-hmm. And what he was talking about, of course, was, to your point, politics is easier if there's opportunity. Mm-hmm. Opportunity exists if people have capacity. It really is, I think, the difference between charity and activism is money and time and people focused on building capabilities so that people can create their own opportunities and have the confidence and the empowerment and the enablement to do so. And so I think he said something very smart. It really is all about economics, and government can help, the private sector can help, private individuals can help, but I think we have to focus our efforts on creating opportunities and creating skills and capabilities that are sustainable.
Carly, if you'd share with us your personal experience moving from a corporation that was obviously for-profit, focusing on the bottom line or maximizing shareholder returns, to being in the field of civic activism and engagement. What was that transition like for you? And do you feel that you could do more in the realm, in the NGO realm, rather than the corporation?
Well, certainly there are differences between being in the not-for-profit world or the NGO world and the for-profit world. I had a very strong view as a chief executive that it was in our company's enlightened self-interest to be engaged in communities and to help build capacity. And one of the I have taken many of the lessons that we learned in that work into my work today. So for example, one of the lessons we learned that my colleagues here also know is that you cannot go into a community and impose goals and objectives. The community must understand and develop its own objectives and own those objectives. Secondly, we learned that skills, particularly management skills, are as important sometimes in a community as money. How are goals established? How is progress measured? How are constituencies formed to deliver against those objectives? Those are management skills, and so sometimes the most important thing that can be given is not lots of money, but people to actually go in and help build those capabilities. So the point I'm trying to make is many of the lessons that we learned, that I learned personally, being engaged in community and capacity building as a corporate executive, I've taken into the private world. I guess the other thing that I would say is, and I could tell so many stories to illustrate this, but we've seen many of them in the film that we just saw. One of the very important things that I think anyone who is passionate about this needs to really believe, and we see it demonstrated over and over again, is that every single individual has enormous potential. It really doesn't matter how poor they are. It doesn't matter where they live. None of that matters. Every individual has incredible potential. And so I think applying even little bits of money, little bits of time, as well as billions of dollars of money and years of time, I think if that money and time is focused on unlocking potential of individuals and building capacity that is sustainable, that's a worthy goal.
It's all about just giving opportunity.
And creating opportunity.
Creating opportunity. And you know, over the past years we've actually seen so many changes in the relationship between NGOs and the private sector. They used to view each other with suspicion, and now they're realizing that they have a strategic interest in working together, that they can both benefit from one another. And we've seen people like yourself moving from the private sector into the NGO sector, and from the NGO sector into the private sector. They never would have imagined working together, but then now it's happening. And also recently we've seen a trend of hybrid organizations that are neither